Welcome back to the Scholars at Risk 2020 Global Congress in virtual format. This is our final plenary session for day 2 and the final session for the virtual Congress. We'll begin now. The title for this session is a conversation with President Paula Johnson of Wellesley College and Hahrie of the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University. I'm Rob Quinn, the Executive Director of Scholars at Risk. The basic housekeeping again. At the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. That's your way to submit any questions you'd like to our speakers. There is an anonymous option if you don't want your name to appear in the queue. We also encourage you to continue the conversation via social media by using @ScholarsAtRisk and hashtag SAR Congress 2020 through Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. As I said at the start of the Congress yesterday, even in normal times, our network, Scholars at Risk, of which all of you are a part, is about resilience. We exist to assist colleagues overcome pressures and threats, document attacks on the higher education space, to preserve and promote the values of that space, values that are important not only to higher education, but to everyone in society. The resilience at the heart of our network has been on display these last 2 days as we join together in this virtual format. I want to thank President Johnson and her terrific staff for their commitment to our network and to the Congress, and for sharing her time today, despite the many challenges facing all higher education leaders at this time. Paula Johnson is the 14th president of Wellesley College. She is a path-breaking physician, scientist, and educator. She's an expert on healthcare, public health, and health policy. She's been recognized globally as an innovator in advancing, promoting, and defending the education, health, and well-being of women, including critically important work furthering our knowledge of biological differences between men and women and ensuring that these are effectively translated into research and patient care. Before Wellesley, President Johnson, a cardiologist, founded and served as the inaugural executive director of the Connors Center for Women's Health and Gender Biology, and was chief of the Division of Women's Health, both at Brigham and Women's Hospital. She's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the National Academy of Medicine, a recipient of numerous awards, medals, and distinctions, and has served on numerous national and international boards. President Johnson, thank you for being with us.
It's an honor, Rob.
I also want to thank and welcome Dr. Hahrie. She's the inaugural director of the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University, a multidisciplinary academic and public forum dedicated to strengthening global democracy by improving and expanding civic engagement and inclusive dialogue, and by supporting inquiry that leads to real-world change involving scholars, practitioners, students, and the public. The Institute draws its name and inspiration from the ancient Athenian Agora, the heart of democratic governance in Athens. Han is also a professor of political science and faculty director of the P3 Research Lab at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Han specializes in the study of civic and political participation, social movements, collective action, and organizing, particularly as it pertains to democratic revitalization. Her newest book will be published by the University of Chicago Press in the fall, entitled Prisms of the People, Power and Organizing in 21st Century America. We had, of course, hoped to be having this conversation together on Johns Hopkins' beautiful campus in Baltimore, but we're grateful to both of you for joining us in this virtual format. Now, without delay, Hahrie, the session is yours.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for joining us today online. I'm only sorry that we can't be together in person. President Johnson, I have to say that I'm just really looking forward to this conversation. I can't imagine a better person to be having this conversation with, not only because of your position as president of Wellesley College, but also as a public health leader who I think is uniquely positioned to speak about the role of higher education in this particular moment that we're in. And I should also just add on a personal note that for me, it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you. Rob didn't mention this, but my first job out of grad school was as on the faculty at Wellesley College, and I still consider it, or I hope to be able to consider it as my home. And I'm really delighted to be able to have this conversation with you today. So maybe President Johnson, we can just start by just checking in. How is your campus community doing, and how are you all responding to this extraordinary time that we're in together?
Well, Hahrie, I just want to say your reputation, you have left a very large footprint on the Wellesley campus, and it's so wonderful to be here with you today. And for this conversation, I want us to keep it informal. Please call me Paula, and I'm going to call you Hahrie.
Great.
So, just thank you for checking in. It's really been, just an unprecedented time. And what I can say is that our community here at Wellesley, as I'm sure so many communities, have faced this crisis really leading with values, really showing their resilience, leading with care, focusing deeply on providing an outstanding education to our students. And it's really been truly a remarkable experience to live through over these past few weeks and obviously into the future. But I do just want to say, our thoughts are really with the frontline
Right.
healthcare workers and public health leaders and those who are providing care on the front line in so many places and really going out every day and putting their own lives at risk and doing it with strength and generosity. So our thoughts are with them.
Yes, thank you for grounding us in that. So one thing I want to ask about is you're thinking about the way that Wellesley and a lot of other institutions of higher education have adapted themselves to this moment, is this idea of what Scholars at Risk often talks about is this idea of the sort of space for ideas. And as we are all reimagining and coming to understand the space of higher education differently, I'm wondering how you all at Wellesley or you in your role as a college president think about what it means for higher education to be a space, and how did you think about it maybe before the pandemic came upon us, and then how are you all thinking about it now?
Well, it's a really important question because we tend to think about that space to a large degree, particularly on a residential liberal arts campus, which is what we are, as a physical space. There is very virtual natures of it, parts of it, of course, but the physicality, the residential living, which is an essential component of the education. It's both inside and outside of the classroom. It's all the connections that students are making with faculty, with each other, in that very fluid way. It's when they are on campus, it's that practice for life that is so important. And this experience has really upended that. And in many ways, we have to rethink what quote unquote space is. It's something that Scholars at Risk live with every single day. So some of the things we've really been thinking about are, as we provide a virtual education, how are we going to make those connections? It's both in the virtual classroom, but how do we make that a more continuous experience? We've been talking, as we think about breaking down barriers and moving across difference, we've really been talking about what we're calling the curriculum of connection. A number of ways for us to really move beyond our echo chambers and break down silos. How do we continue that work in a way that we are not physically together? And in many ways, I think this is going to be a tremendous learning experience, because in many quarters, they've demonized, in a way, the virtual world, social media, curated echo chambers. We're going to be using that world to create connection and create powerful connection. And we're only at the beginning of really understanding how we're going to do it. But I think we are committed here with a strong plan coming out of the gate to how we begin to really ensure not only the connections, but how do we get those connections also across difference? I look at the opportunity that we had, I think in our lifetimes, 9/11, which you saw people coming together in new and different ways, kind of coming together across difference. I think this is this moment right now. We wasted that one because we let things go back to, in a way, the way it was before. We cannot allow that to happen. And I think higher ed is going to be forever changed. How? I can't tell you, but we're going to learn.
Right. I just want to ask one follow-up question to what you just said, which is, I love this idea of the curriculum of connection. It's such a powerful idea. And you'd said that you all see the curriculum connection as being foundational to allowing the kind of free and open exchange of ideas that we see as being fundamental to higher education. And can you just expound a little bit on why that connection, why those connections are so important to enabling that exchange of ideas?
You know, we had a long process of really coming to how do we make more robust the exchange of ideas, and at the core was really how do we connect with each other?
Mm-hmm.
How do we understand each other as people? What is trust? What does vulnerability look like? And, you know, we all strongly believe in the values of academic freedom, academic rigor, the exchange of ideas, but we also strongly believe in care. And we strongly believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when we talk about the curriculum of connection, it is rooted in those strong academic values, but it's also rooted in these other values that you can't have one without the other, that it is really about that connection that really allows us to move forward, to be open to the ideas.
I love that idea, because I think so often people, when they're thinking about they forget about the idea of connection as they're thinking about the exchange of ideas, and to sort of show how they're rooted is just so important. So I want to go and ask you a little bit about something that you said at the very beginning, which is that as Wellesley College has been navigating this transition, you've really been doing it with a focus on what the core values are that animate your work. And how do you, I wonder if you can sort of tell us more about how you think the values of your institution are helping you navigate this challenge. Like what is it in the DNA of Wellesley College or in higher education more broadly that enable these institutions to respond?
Yeah, I strongly believe that as we came together, it was first and foremost, how do we care for our community?
Mm-hmm.
How do we continue with the core mission of educating our students? How do we really coalesce around making sure that those who are not able to access the same kind of material, internet, you name it, how do we really ensure that every single student and that every single faculty member have the ability to move forward in this time? So I do think it was really leading with values, with the mission being central. And it was very powerful to see. You know, I think that we also at our core recognize, and, you know, I knew this before because I know who our students are, but we are really the safety net for a whole population of students. There were students from around the globe who couldn't travel home, but there are also students who don't have a home. Students who, if they are going home, have to have the right resources. And we are the place that either keeps them here because it's their safety net, or we ensure what they get allows them to access education. So, you know, it has really been, again, leading with those values, one not greater than the other, but all of them being critical to serve the entire community.
That's great. So I want to pivot our discussion a little bit. And here I think we're probably drawing on your expertise, both as a scholar of public health, but also as the president of an institution of higher education, which is, you know, this pandemic in some ways, one of the things that it's doing is causing all of us to rethink the role of different social and educational and political institutions in our society. And as you think about this from your vantage point and think about the what role higher education can play in, you know, maybe in addressing this pandemic, but also just in thinking about the global challenges that we're facing around the world, how are you thinking about those questions, either for Wellesley or in general?
Well, you know, Hahrie, I'd love this to be a little bit of a back and forth with both of us, because I think your work is, and your institute really to me is such a beautiful example of the direction in which we need to take higher education, which is, what is the role of scholarship, of the learning, and how do we take that and push that out, not unilaterally, right, but really in partnership with those who understand the translation on the front line. And I think that we've already begun to see a movement in that direction. I know we have on our campus with a program and some work that we are looking to expand. But I think that how we approach and focus on the complex problems of the world, it is what our students are hungry for.
Yeah.
I think more and more it is what our faculty also want to come together to, yes, keep their deep expertise in their discipline, but how do we come together to understand in a very interdisciplinary way how we bring that knowledge to bear? How do we partner with practitioners? Not necessarily believe that the ivory tower has the answer.
Yeah.
It is part of the complex approach to the world. And I think there's nothing more than a crisis like this, that brings that thinking to bear. So I would really hope that as we move forward, this is the work that I have to do in my college. It's the work that we have to do in our colleges and universities. And I do want to make a point, because I think when we talk about this, this direction, we frequently only focus on universities, because universities have a number of graduate schools, professional schools. I do think there is absolute room for this in all corners of the academy. It might look a little different, but in all corners of the academy.
Yeah, I should just say, so, the institute that I run, the SNF Agora Institute, we're dedicated to becoming a space through which we translate insights from academic research into usable knowledge for civic and political actors around the world, with the goal of strengthening global democracy. And one of the things that we say a lot is that the most complex problems that we face are not problems of information, right? There's a way in which, like, we're all carrying around the totality of human knowledge and, in our pockets, and we don't have a lack of information out in the world. What we lack are the sort of strategic and relational capacities that we need to apply that information into actually solving problems that we want to solve together. And
absolutely.
How can we've been thinking a lot about this question that you're talking about, which is, how do universities and colleges need to remake themselves so as to enable them to be important players in that space? And I would totally agree with the point that colleges and the educational mission of institutions have just as much work to just as much of an important role to play as research institutions and so on.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is, I'm going to put on my physician public health hat here. Sure. I think that this crisis has also shown us that the translation of what we understand that is critical in terms of the world of public health and critical in healthcare delivery can also not be looked upon as silos.
Right.
I think it brings it very clear that the translation and the connection between public health and healthcare delivery, we have to talk about them together. We have to deeply invest together in a way that our institutions today are not set up for.
Yeah.
They are way too siloed, and in fact, live in some ways in competition with each other. And I think this is another moment where we should really move that aside and move into what is best for the common good.
Right. Yeah. And how do we learn to pass the baton, so to speak? So it's not just having really great runners, but also knowing how to pass the baton from one to another. That's a great point. Yeah. And so as we think about this and the role of higher education and filling these gaps that we've been talking about, to the point that you made earlier, sometimes people do say, well, gosh, like, what role do these ivory tower academics really have to play in solving problems in my life? And it's not an unfair criticism, but on the other hand, I'm wondering, how would you articulate what the role of higher education is, particularly with an eye towards the questions that scholars at risk think about, and protecting that space for a free and open exchange of ideas, and allowing for the academic freedom that makes the academy work in a lot of ways, and makes it possible.
I think that freedom, that academic freedom, the space for rigorous scholarship, and for bringing our students into that world, it could not be more relevant. But with that, I think that we have even a greater role to play in how we move beyond the silos of our fields, how we create the structures in our colleges and universities that value that interdisciplinarity. We talk a lot about it, but honestly, we have not changed the structure to truly support it without creating yet another silo. I think your center is a beautiful example of where you have that form, you have that space, the ability to do this. We need to be doing more of that, because it is where we are going to get the greatest impact of some of the most brilliant minds we have on our campuses. And I think that that's a big challenge. Change is not easy, but it is a road that I think we must travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how does that look from the perspective of students? So, right now we have students all over the world that are transitioning, what they thought their college experience was going to be like. And as we think about breaking down the silos, certainly that needs to happen in terms of the research and the work that faculty do together to try to work on societal problems. What does it look like from the perspective of students, do you think?
Yeah, it's they're going to have their classroom experience, and that's going to be a journey in and of itself.
Right.
But I think beyond that, we have, and I want to get back to our curriculum of connection. We have a whole strategy of how we will bring our students together virtually. Now, I'm not going to pretend it's the same as them being physically present on campus. We will not have athletics. We will not have so many of the things that our students come to, that they're here and they love and that are so critical. But how do we come together? Well, we're having at Wellesley, one of the things we do, it's a very old tradition, but there are teas. Our dean of students had tea with a group of virtual students. We have a series of those. We have ways of bringing, in terms of thinking about our residence halls, which are really the microcosms, right? Of people aren't there with a like idea. They are the world of difference. And we have our student leaders from our residence halls working to bring the students together in new and different ways. We have our religious and spiritual life team reaching out and thinking about how they work differently together. And I could go on, but we have an entire plan for what this will look like for our students while they are not with us physically. It's a grand experiment. Right. It's one that I'm sure we're going to continue to iterate and evolve, but it's going to be an important experiment.
Yeah.
And one that, as I said, the job is going to be, when this pandemic is over, we will be forever changed. Yeah. We are going to have to understand how we embrace that learning and really move forward, as opposed to saying it's over, let's just go back to the way it was.
Right.
And that's something that we have the agency to do.
Yeah. Well, I think we are unfortunately running near the end of our time. I think I have a lot of other things that I would love to talk with you about, but maybe the final question that I'll pose is, speaking to that last point that you just made, which is that we don't want to come out of the pandemic and just revert back to where we were. And of course, if we think back to where we were in a moment when higher education really was under assault, and from a variety of different places and for a variety of different reasons. And, it engendered the need for organizations like Scholars at Risk. And if you had sort of one final message to give to the audience, as we think about navigating our way out of this pandemic and creating and imagining a different world that could ensue as we find our way out, what would that message be?
Well, I think it really goes back to your work. It goes back to what I said earlier, which is that first thing, as our students leave our colleges and universities, I think with this crisis, and it wasn't as though we didn't focus on this, but I think it becomes ever more important that we stress that they are citizens of the world, and that they leave with an education with a tremendous responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And so that's one piece. The second piece is, how do we more actively look to problem solve in ways that are across disciplines and beyond the ivory tower? And that is partnering with those on the front line, with practitioners, to understand that translation. And then I would say that that we, I think, have shown great humanity to each other, and we need to figure out how to extend that. We are doing, many of us are partnering with other organizations and really thinking deeply about our role. You know, I don't have the answer today, but again, it is about that evolution, that outward look, that sense of civic responsibility that yes, our students will leave with, but what is that role for the college, for the university?
Yeah, I love that, and I love the picture I love the picture of the sort of new world that you're painting, in this idea that we don't have to have the answer right now, but we have, what we're trying to do is create a process through which we can learn the right answer. So thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that our audience did too.
Well, Hahrie, what I want to just say is thank you for the really breakthrough work that you do. I mean, you really are leading the way, and I just want to say what an honor it was to share this space with you.
Oh, the honor was really all mine, so thank you. I'll turn it back over to Rob now.
Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Hahrie, and thank you, Paula. And really, the honor was all of ours listening. We really appreciate it. As we wrap up, I'd like to invite, joining us already on the screen is Rosalie Wolf, an alumnus of Wellesley College, a friend and a board member of Scholars at Risk, to share a few remarks for all of you on behalf of the Scholars at Risk board.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you so very much. Well, I will call you Paula, our wonderful president. I'm a very proud Wellesley alum and a member of the Scholars at Risk board, and I think that Scholars at Risk, in fact, is a partnership with practitioners, and I love your concept. I think that will work in many, many ways. We have a lot of academic partners, and we have practitioners, Rob among them, who are just extraordinary at what they do. We do thank you so much, Paula, for Wellesley's support of Scholars at Risk over the years and in the current times, and for your taking time on your very busy schedule to speak to us today. I do want to thank you as well for, I suspect, providing some encouragement to that incredible Wellesley video that you can find on the New York Times website. If there's any question about whether today's alums are going to be capable of helping to fix the problems in the world, that very short video will convince you immediately. The board very much thanks you for your participation, and we also want to thank Rob, who, of course, as our executive director, does an incredible job of putting this together. I guess made a very last-minute decision to change, as we all had to do, to a virtual conference, which is a very large one, doing it with remarkable success and very few glitches. So I represent Kate Stimpson, our inimitable chairman, who is a perfect, within one person, a partnership between academia and practitioners. I hope we can all help to erase some of the barriers and silos that characterize our lives. Thank you again very, very much. And I will turn this back to Rob so that he can give you last minute good wishes and send you back to your virtual lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie. Yes, and so less than 4 weeks ago, we were racing toward our 2020 Global Congress in the traditional format. Looking forward to 5 days of workshops and trainings and advocacy and panels and plenaries in Washington. and Baltimore, and expecting people to come from 30 different countries. The virus, of course, made that in-person meeting this week impossible, but it doesn't mean our work is impossible. On the contrary, it only shows how necessary it is. And so, as I said in my opening remarks yesterday, I'll say it again today, what was important before is still important. What we needed and wanted in our communities yesterday is what we still need and still want in our communities today, and what we will want and will need tomorrow. So thank you for being a part of this experiment, this event. Thank you for being a part of this network. Thank you for everything you do on your campuses, in your virtual spaces, your national sections and networks to help us respond to the current challenges as we always have, with creativity, with solidarity, with humor, with compassion, and with friendship. Together, we will keep up our network and together create new opportunities to protect threatened scholars, promote academic freedom, and defend everyone's freedom to think, question, and share ideas. We look forward to sharing the videos, sessions from this Congress with you all soon. And remember, mark your calendars for the week of November 16th to the 20th, 2020, when we hope we can get together in person again. And finally, if I may, to close the Congress, I want to ask all the SAR staff to turn on their cameras so that all of you in the network can see their faces and know that they're here behind the scenes working for and with all of us. So if you'd please, staff, turn on your cameras now. Please allow me to thank them. They are so dedicated to our mission, to our network, to our member institutions and the representatives there, and especially to the scholars we serve. Each and every one of them has stepped up over the last few weeks to bring you this virtual Congress, even while they've been hard at work maintaining our core services for scholars and universities. So I'm so grateful to each of them and proud of what they do as individuals and as a team. So thank you, staff, for a great 2020 Congress. Thank you to everyone participating. Please unmute your microphones and let's all give ourselves a round of applause. We look forward to connecting very soon. And until then, thank you all. Have a good evening, afternoon, and morning, wherever you are. Thank you, everyone.